I am Michael Hope. I'm a co-founder of Multimed, and we're delighted to be running this webinar today with our friends at Camino. And it's absolutely in line with our mission to encourage pharma companies and life sciences companies to connect with their healthcare professional customers with better quality content for the benefit ultimately of the patients they treat. So the reason we wanted to put this panel discussion together is that we live in a world where access to information and knowledge is effectively growing exponentially. But we also constantly hear back from healthcare professionals that they need better access to quality information and education that they can trust and is consistent. So with our amazing panel today, we're going to be exploring what medical education, knowledge, and information needs healthcare professionals have, as well as the latest trends in communications and content and format, and what makes content attractive to healthcare professionals, and ultimately how to build an audience that's going to engage with you for the long term and has some faith and trust in what you're providing. Critically, we're also going to look at where life sciences companies can add better value and use this type of approach to build better relationships with their healthcare professional audiences across all different spectrums as a result of really stepping up to the plate and meeting their needs for better quality medical education. So hopefully we'll manage to get through a lot of that today. Firstly, I would like to introduce our panel, and they'll also tell you a little bit more about themselves as we go through. But we're delighted to have Dr. Azmain Chowdhury. He's a doctor working in the NHS, also a health content creator. And I think his latest or his biggest hit has got millions of views on TikTok and YouTube. Dr. Priya Shikandarash is a hematology consultant and educational communicator. She's got a large following on Twitter and constantly brings to the attention of her audience the latest in scientific knowledge and thinking. Lara DeBull is a medical affairs strategist and consultant, and I would like to say to some extent an agitator with life sciences companies around what their medical affairs function can and should be. And also James Turnbull, who is the founder of an omni-channel Medcomms agency and all-round AI expert. So thank you all for joining us, and looking forward to getting your views and opinions on this topic. So let me throw this to you to start with. So what really is the underlying need from healthcare professionals out there around constantly keeping up their education, access to knowledge and information, and what challenges and issues do they have when it comes to meeting that need? So Priya, let me start with you.
I knew you'd pick on me first. So
you're in the top left of my screen.
Yeah, no, it's fine. So in terms of the challenges, so especially in the world of hematology, we are constantly being inundated with new changes in guidelines, in treatments, with trials, and if I'm honest, from a consultant level, it's very challenging to keep up to date with this. Throughout my sort of hematology training, we were expected to do reading outside of work, but you can imagine in the NHS, it's not always easy to do that. In relation to sort of pharma, I was fortunate enough to do a PhD during my training, and was therefore able to access more latest information and made some connections that way. But I think if I didn't have that research background, I probably wouldn't have had those opportunities. And I think it's actually a real shame, because actually I think there is a lot of information out there which we are not aware of. And if I'm being brutally honest with you, I don't always get the latest information from different companies and so on. It's not easy to access it. You know, we're very busy, all of us. We have a lot of things going on all the time. And we're meant to have time to be able to update ourselves, because especially I work in a tertiary center. I'm seeing patients who are referred to me for second opinions, and I need to be able to demonstrate to them that I have the latest information and latest knowledge. And if I'm honest, sometimes I don't feel like I do. And I sort of wish that there was an easier way for me to have access to that information, which I can look at very quickly and give a more summarized point of view on the latest drugs, because a lot of patients, they know exactly what's going on. They're very clued up. They do go on websites, they talk to each other, and they do, sometimes they'll ask me questions about new drugs, which I haven't heard about yet. So, you know, so it would be, I think it's such an important thing for us. It's an important need. So, yeah.
And Priya, we've heard before that the protected time that you're supposed to have for learning
Yeah.
in reality, you know, doesn't exist. I mean, how big a challenge is just that time aspect of it all?
Gosh, how long's a piece of string? I mean, yeah. During my working week, I'm meant to have one afternoon. This is not just me, all consultants, we're meant to have half a day allocated for learning and for doing these extra activities and for progression. If I'm honest, it never happens. I'm often doing all this learning out of hours. I'm sure Azmain will say the same. So often out of hours, after work, at home, you know, once the kids are in bed, sitting there trying to read papers, or at the weekends, you're trying to catch up with papers and latest things. You mentioned about Twitter, so I do use Twitter quite a lot. If I'm honest, that is the only way I find out about lots of the latest medicines and trials. So that is actually, social media is so important now, I think, in trying to extend our knowledge and actually building those connections as well. But yeah, answering your question, never in the time there's never enough time. So yeah.
It sounds like a tough challenge, Priya, so thanks for just highlighting that. Azmain, let's have your thoughts on the matter.
So I think I'm probably going to echo quite a bit of what Dr. Priya said. So in my journey, I am currently looking to enter specialty training. So I'm looking to enter GP training. So that's the level I'm at. But I can only assume that it's going to get harder and harder as I go up the ladder, obviously. But even so, at the moment, in terms of keeping up with my educational needs, number one, obviously, in terms of my day-to-day clinical work, I have to keep up with all of the knowledge. At the moment, I'm currently going through different rotations, whether that could be like cardiology, psychiatry, GP, accident and emergency. Currently, I'm in the ear, nose, and throat department. So obviously, moving around, you need to keep up with all of those, all of the knowledge and the practical skills that are involved in those different specialties. And as a junior doctor, you move around every 4 months or so. So there's quite a lot of pressure to kind of switch from one workplace to another and then have to keep up on top of all of the reading around those particular specialties. That's number one. Number two, as I'm looking to enter specialist training, obviously I have to do further professional exams. In order to study for those, I have to do that all in my own time. Number three, I guess going back to the workplace itself, we are given some self-development days during our rotas where we can work on our portfolio and do kind of extra work, online seminars, that kind of thing. But it ends up being that it just takes a lot more time than that. The given 1 day per month to actually fulfill all of those needs. Number four, I'm currently doing a master's degree in medical education. So being medics, it's not enough for us to have an MBBS degree. constantly pursuing master's degrees, PhDs, and we end up doing all of that in our own time. And number 5, the reason that I'm on this call is because I create health education content on social media, and I'm not just your run-of-the-mill influencer. I can't just pull up my phone, create a dance video, and put it up on TikTok. I have to meticulously research what I'm talking about, make sure it's up to date with all the guidance, whether it's NHS guidelines, NICE guidance, the latest info on PubMed, and I have to create, I have to come up with the idea, research it, script it all out, make sure that, people are actually going to watch this video, spend all my time editing it and then putting it out and seeing how it does. So for me personally, that's all the different domains that I have to spend outside of my time in clinical work to make sure that I'm keeping myself up to date on the latest innovations, the latest health news, and somehow as like this crazy puzzle fitting it all in.
Oh, it's a lot of plates to keep spinning, Azmain. But so Lara, let me come to you here because you're very close with the medical affairs side of companies. And how well do you think they appreciate this time and information challenge that healthcare professionals actually have?
I think, Mike, it's interesting. I think there is a awareness that there is, there's people are stuck for time. Quite to how much people are stuck for time and all the pressures you're on, it's not, it's slightly theoretical. So, it's funny, the conversation that I was having with some people in medical affairs this morning was in medical affairs, like that upskilling to keep on top of the knowledge, keep on top of the data in your therapy area is the bit that always falls down to your priority, at the bottom of your priority list. Now, it's different for doctors. It's very important for you to stay on top, but you have to carve out that time and it's really challenging. So, the things that were occurring to me as you were both speaking was, what can make it easier for you? I know, Priya, you were saying that you look at Twitter, but from a pharma perspective, some of the information, when pharma are providing information, it has to be fair and balanced. So, from an ethical and compliance perspective, and also so that somebody can make a rational prescribing decision, you can't just give efficacy data, you have to provide that safety data at the same time. But what is the best way from your perspective when you are so time crunched to really get that information? And the other thing that occurred to me was, when we hear a message the first time, that's fine. But I know myself, like for me, I always find it easier training people because then it sticks in my head. So the more you're going through, when you're creating your content and you're sharing with other people, that information sticks. But if you don't have that opportunity or you're not putting it into practice, how many times do you need to see that information for it to resonate with you so that you can absorb it?
I think that's a really nice point, Lara. Yeah, I think that consistency of information and access to it and the reinforcing it is quite a difficult challenge. Just to round out this sort of the need side of the discussion, James, let me just come to you because I think when it comes to the time challenge aspect of it, where do you see the key to success with supporting an audience around that aspect purely? If you've got a time constrained audience, I mean, what practically can you do from a content point of view to help?
I think so like in the last 5 years, when we talk about content, we've moved from that being rep-led content. Pre-COVID, it was pretty much all rep-led. And then COVID and digital and other things happened. And now content is lots of things. It's tweets, it's TikToks, it's emails, websites, all of these things. And with that, we found a lot of companies have got better at creating a sort of content, a depth of content and a variety of depth. So you can't put all an entire, product information in a tweet or in an email. And sometimes those constraints are actually quite good. So like when Priya's talking about, information about a new product, what we'll encourage pharma to do is, if you're putting an email out, is to just put new product, treats this for this patient population. Want more info? Go here. And then you lead to more depth. And then that again leads to more depth or more information or sideline information. But by having a connection between those data points, you're able to do that rather than just going, hey, clinical trial here, 15 pages. You want to read that? Which you've not got time for. So giving that variety of depth of content and connecting them up, I find for pharma works a lot better in driving that engagement for obvious reasons.
Cool. Thank you, James. So there's obviously a need there, and a whole variety of actors are trying to provide some of that need. From pharma companies to patient associations to medical societies to clinician creators like Azmain, so on and so forth. So if you want to try and build an audience of healthcare professionals, what are the absolute gold standards that you have to meet if you're going to be able to engage with them on an ongoing basis? So you create a lot of content, Azmain. So let's start with you. What do you see as being the success of the content that you've created and why it's been successful?
I think there's one key word, which is accessibility. So there's a reason that a lot of healthcare professionals and healthcare students engage with my content is because my platforms are social media. Now, for example, Multimed is a very different platform because it's focused solely on healthcare professionals. So it's about tailoring your content to the platform and to your audience. The way that I've managed to tailor my content is, for example, my trademark medical quizzes. I make them visually and intellectually attractive and stimulating enough that anyone that comes across it on social media will be interested in it. But those particular videos are kind of gamified. Obviously, everyone loves to test their knowledge. So as you continue through the video, it tests the knowledge of what I like to call my medical expert level. So in terms of the social media algorithms, social media platforms want as many eyes as possible for as long as possible. So I'm fulfilling that by having these flashy looking videos and editing styles, but with solid medical content behind it. So people love to watch it, but the real, the medical professionals who manage to get to the end of that video are still fulfilled by watching it. And I think that points something out to me, is that, the healthcare professionals that the pharmaceutical industry are aiming towards are just regular human beings who love scrolling on Facebook or TikTok and love watching humorous, funny, and entertaining content. They don't have the time to spend on a 1-hour seminar that's going to bore the hell out of them, and they're not going to actually get that much out of it. So I think the key, and one of the things that I've learned very much through content creation, is the skill of being succinct. And you wouldn't think it the way I'm rambling on right now, but with the advent of these short and vertical video platforms, you basically have 1 minute to get all of your information across. And that means you have to be very selective about the information you choose in that 1 minute. An example I can give is a video that I made on whooping cough, which got about 1.3 million views on TikTok within a week. And, there's a whooping cough outbreak. It's an important topic that people need to hear about. So my video hook for that specific video was an example of a whooping cough sound. So that immediately catches people's attention, and people want to watch, what the hell is this? And then I explain 5 children have died from whooping cough. There's my video hook. So I think that, you know, when we're aiming towards a professional audience, there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from social media, in that, you know, we're all human beings. We all have short attention spans relatively, and we want to get across the gist of the message as quickly as possible. And as James was saying, there's always the opportunity to signpost further information. Where I've used particular sources, I always signpost, this is the particular study I've used, or this is the news article in the BBC or something that I've referenced. And so anyone who's interested in that can go along and read further. But if you want to reach out to a bigger audience and make your message heard, then it's really about how you're going to deliver the headlines and how you are going to script your message in a way that's directly targeted to your audience. It's not just what information do I want to get across, it's what information is my audience looking for. And sometimes there's a difference between the information that the pharmaceutical industry wants to convey, all of the safety information, all of this and that, and the information that medics are looking for. And there's a way to marry those two together in a way that isn't a 1-hour lecture or seminar that someone has to sit through.
Cool. I mean, I'm just going to bring Lara in, or James, you go first. That's fine.
Just really quickly, when we talk to clients, we talk about that as the common ground. There's a common ground between what your audience want and what you want to say. And you can't be to either end extreme of that, but you generally start towards what your audience want, and you kind of pull them slightly closer to what you want to say in that deep dive of content as you get deeper. But you have to start in the middle, because if you do just start, you know, like, this is all we want to say, then you're just doing product-led marketing. You're just making noise, and that's, as we know, making noise and wasting people's time. So totally agree.
Lara, you're nodding away here, so I want to get your thoughts on this.
No, I think it's really important is that, you know, pharma obviously have an agenda, and when I say that is, you have objectives, you have information you want to get out there on your product because you know it's going to benefit patients. But whether you're doing medical education, whether you're doing a promotional message, as James said, there has to be that common ground. You also, as Azmain said, you need to understand what is it that your target audience needs to hear? What's their gap in their knowledge? Like, how do you make it valuable for them? If you don't create value for your audience, then it's no use. So you need to know what are their needs, their objectives, and then how do you provide it? Now, I will say from a pharma perspective, when you're saying the safety and efficacy, I know if there's anybody from compliance watching, because it has to be balanced. And, you know, that I always have that voice in the back of my head, and it does. But I remember when I was working as a final signatory, reviewing a promotional marketing email on a study, and somebody wanted, you know, the agency come up with this nice hook. And then they said, and, you know, this product does this. And I went back and I said, you know, you need to balance it for safety and efficacy, and you need to put in trial design. And the comment back was, well, it's a promotional, like, it's an email. It can't be pages and pages long. And I said, I totally agree with you. I want one line in there saying this is a phase 3 run. So you can tailor it. You can keep it short and succinct and keep it balanced. And as if needs be, as both James and Azmain have said, is you put a link in to a kind of more in-depth reference or piece of content so that you're satisfying everyone's needs. But you can't just push information out there. You need to know what your audience needs to hear. What do they want to hear first? And in order to do that, pharma need to gather those insights and really listen to what physicians need before they create things. It'll also save them wasting time and energy and resources on creating things that don't have any impact.
Cool. Thanks, Lara. Priya, I guess from your heavy use of Twitter, X, or whatever we call it now, you know, the accessibility and the immediacy of information's something that you can relate with.
Mm.
But out of all of that huge sort of morass of information that is on Twitter, how do you pick out what you're actually going to put some credence on? Where do you what signposts something to you as being interesting, valuable, trustworthy, and worth a little bit more of a look?
That's really tough, if I'm honest with you. I mean, I agree with everything. I think for me, at the end of the day, it's always about the patients and about what is going to benefit the patients. What do they want to know? Because they will always come to me in the clinics and they will always have questions about these new drugs that are coming out. Are they going to be effective, doctor? Are they going to make me feel better? What are the side effects? And that's essentially what I try to find through Twitter, is all the big trials. But as James has already said, there's a lot of information from trials. If I'm honest, I don't want to read 15 pages of the latest clinical trial. I just want the bullet points. What is the safety? What's the efficacy? What can I summarize really quickly? In terms of Twitter itself, it's really difficult, if I'm honest with you. So I follow a lot of people on Twitter from all over the world. And if I'm honest, I do pick and choose almost the ones who are succinct, to the point, who give me relevant data, clinically relevant data, which I think, okay, this is useful for people because this is going to impact our patients. And, we are in the UK, so I have to think about those restrictions as well. I don't want to put information out there that is not technically available for my patients, because then it's raising their hopes as well. So it is quite hard. I think it's really, really difficult. And I do take a lot on board of what Lara said about pharma. Like it's really difficult because pharma, I get a lot of those emails, the promotional emails, and I get signposted, look at this trial. Like, yes, but I don't have time to look at this trial and things. I just want the basic points, and I want to know, what can I tell my patient and what can I say to them in the 10 minutes I have in clinic. It's never 10 minutes, but to be able to raise this information across, especially if it's a new drug, which not many of us know much about. So I think there's a lot that can be improved. And at the moment, as I said, I'm pulling information from everywhere, but if there's one succinct place which I could go to, which has got this information, it's succinct, I know it's safe, I know it's reliable, it is including things from pharma, that would be great. I think it would be a game changer, if I'm honest with you.
Thanks, Priya. I'm just going to touch on to the content side of things that pharma companies can and could provide, because sometimes it's a slightly agonizing process for them to create some content. So, Lara, let's start with you. What's that sort of approach that you would suggest to companies who, hearing this today, might realize that their current content mix isn't quite ideal for, digital consumption by their intended audience? What are the first steps that, might help them move in a better direction?
I think it's a really good question. And I also like your point, agonizing. Mike, it can be quite agonizing, I think, for companies creating content, because I know one of the roadblocks, and having been at the end of the process, the compliance perspective and the sign off is a big issue. So I think the first thing, there's a couple of things that people need to do. One is talk to their clinicians, talk to, gather those insights from the doctors, the consultants, the nurses who are working in that area, and ask them, how do you want to receive your information? What resonates? What helps? Because if you don't ask them, then you're not going to be creating the content that they need. I can see, for example, like things like Twitter, that people might struggle getting things, through approval. But, from an internal perspective, what you need to do, once you've identified how people want to get their information, what that looks like, then get everybody around the table internally and say, right, how are we best going to do it? From a compliance perspective, you need to involve people early on in the discussion so it doesn't become a bottleneck down the road. And it's not about how pharma wants to deliver it. It's what do your audience need? How is that going to resonate? And think about, if you are creating one asset, for example, a webinar, a recording, or you have a meeting, what else can you break that down and chunk that down so it's more accessible? So if you have a report, there's links to something that somebody can read on their own time, where they can go to the website and get short snippets. And again, you figure out how to make that fair and balanced. You do that at the beginning. You don't do that after the activity, but the earlier you do that and you think about all the ways you can use that, that content, means that you can suddenly tailor it to lots of different people and lots of different needs at the end. I don't know if that resonates with, the rest of the panelists.
So, James, I know we've had a previous discussion about, connectivity and relevance of content. So,
I was going to try and disagree with you, Laura. I do
please.
Asking people what content they're interested in, what's the important thing in your specialism, in your area. You're an oncology expert. What do you need to know? Is absolutely right. But I have, for a number of pharma companies, asked the question, like, what channels do you want to use? And like, do you want to receive emails? And would you follow a pharma company on Twitter? And asking those questions is always a complete waste of time, because obviously everybody says, no, I don't want promotional emails from pharma. I know I wouldn't follow them on Twitter. I know I don't want any of that. But we know that that works, right? We run Twitter accounts for pharma companies and we drive engagement on those. So, but when you ask someone, do you want to be marketed to? Most people say no.
And I think that's, as I was going to say, a great point, James, just as you're saying it, because I know people in pharma companies have to get consent to engage with physicians. But then the question is, if you were to go out and ask the same people, the audience, going, do you know what a promotional email is? Do you know what, or what a non-promotional email is? Because there's often like big discussions in-house on, is this non-promotional, is it promotion? What's the best way to do it? Does anybody externally actually know what the difference is, or what that looks like when it lands in their inbox? Because it can be promotional and provide lots of value. It could also be non-promotional and provide lots of value. So you're right, James, asking, again, asking them what way they want the information may not work. So there's maybe trying the different ways. The other thing is asking people what content they want. I'm not sure that'll always work, because you don't know what you don't know. And if you're trying to get something across, that's never going to work. So there's that little bit of, that's where in that gray space, you kind of have to push your message ever so slightly. And that doesn't have to be a promotional message, but it can be.
And what I always tell clients, sorry, just very quickly, Mike, so what I always tell clients is just get on with it. We have spent, and I've done lots of projects where we spent too much time thinking about what we could maybe do and how might we be able to write some content on Twitter, but get something written, get it approved, get it out there, see if it works. If it doesn't, do something different. It's quite easy.
You're smiling, so want to get your thoughts on this. Would you recognize promotional versus non-promotional content coming out from a pharma company?
No.
So
I have to be really brutally honest, Laura. You're right. I don't actually recognize the difference between promotional and non-promotional. And I'll be really brutally honest. If I see something and like, oh, there's a new drug, I just like delete, because I just don't have time to read. If I'm honest, and this is me being brutally honest, I'm busy and I don't have time to read through this. So unless you're giving me very important information, I don't have time to read these emails. And actually, I think we do need to work together. I think what you said, Laura, is right. Is that we probably do need to work a bit better together early, to find out exactly what is important to us as clinicians, because I do feel like we do end up in this bottleneck of compliance, which I hear a lot from lots of people that I know in pharma. So I think it is something we can definitely work on better. But I also agree with James that probably asking too many opinions and then you end up with 10 different opinions about how everyone wants their information, isn't it? And actually, quite frankly, all I want to know is just, is this going to work or not? And, what is this clinically? I just want bullet points, like succinct, just as Azmain said, succinct, to the point, summary. That's all I want. I don't need to read a long email telling me all about this new drug. Thank you very much. So.
You still there, Mike? You've just finished.
We lost you.
I had to reset my video. Sorry about that. So I think, there are some challenges there for pharma companies to continue to work in this space. And I think one of the challenges that I see is that, there'll be a digital tactic that gets thought up and it'll be a one-time sort of thing. And, you know, what I would say to anybody who's looking to, you know, build an audience is that you need to do that on an ongoing basis. You're not going to get a group of people who are going to regularly engage with your content or your message and your information unless you're prepared to really sow, you know, the groundwork on that, show your capability, show your credibility, show that you can be an ongoing trusted source of information and that you're in it for the long haul. So, you know, I want to just talk a little bit about that side of things. It's like, what's involved in actually building up an audience of people who've got some trust in you, you know, aside from the specific, you know, individual pieces of content, you know, what would you need to do to actually allow that to happen? Because that's what every pharma company would love to have, which is a following of healthcare professionals, but very few, if any of them, have that at the moment. So let me just throw that out there. Anybody want to jump in first?
I go, if that's okay. I think this is something I'd said to James before, but I think pharma can be guilty of a one and done mindset. So you have your plan for the year and it's like, I've done this meeting, tick, move on. I've done this, tick, move on. And that comes down to being more strategic and their planning and thinking about how I'm going to do something. So for me, I know when I started in pharma, it was very much that approach in medical affairs. I would do something, tick the box, move on to the next piece. And then when strategy clicked for me, it was thinking about, okay, well, if I'm doing this and I want to roll out something that changes. So we were looking at doing education around treat to target inflammatory bowel disease because it hadn't been done anywhere, at least of all in Ireland. We need to think, okay, if we do one meeting, that's not going to have an impact. So how can we re-embed this message? So everything we did over the period of like a couple of years linked back to that theme and added on. And it wasn't just meetings, it was like one-to-one interactions. It was creating materials that people could use and read at later dates. So it's thinking about in a long term, how can we reinforce this message? How can we build those touch points in so that you can kind of give that longevity to that message and for it to really resonate?
Thanks, Laura. Azmain, you've got probably the biggest audience of the lot of us by a significant margin. How much content do you create? How often do you release it? How, you know, broadly do you disperse each individual piece of content to try and, you know, build up the totality of, you know, the audience that you're engaging with?
So in terms of my strategy, in terms of where I post it across all the big video social media platforms, those being YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. And I think that partly dispersing it across all platforms means that as many people as possible are able to watch this content. But at the same time, there is the fact that each of these platforms are different, the audiences are different, the algorithms are different. So the ideal scenario would be tailoring each particular video to each particular platform. In reality, that's not possible. So the best that I can do from my perspective is try to make each individual video as interesting as possible, well edited, well scripted, to kind of, you know, it's a compromise to make sure that most of my followers across most of my platforms will actually be interested in that content. So there's that element of compromise. When it comes to building the audience, consistency is key. So at the beginning, I was putting out a video every day, and that could be those particular formats like medical quizzes that I did, or reacting to a certain topic that's in the news currently, and providing different perspectives. So I could create a video series on that particular topic. And then if people watch the first video, they're more likely to be delivered the second and the third. And if you kind of create those formats and series that, you know, people actually engage with, then they're more likely to continue watching the next videos in that series. So creating those recognizable formats is one thing. And the third is, you know, how do you ensure to keep building that platform? And I think it's a balance between what Lara and James were talking about. Number one, you have to make sure that you're providing value to the audience, and part of that is getting their feedback. But number two is sometimes you're going to have to spoon feed your audience for them to realize this is, wow, this is what I actually want and need. So there is a careful balance between those to make sure that you are listening to your audience and giving them what they want, giving them what they're interested in. But at the beginning, there may be an aspect of, I'm going to have to throw spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks. And, you know, in pharma with compliance, it's not as easy as throwing spaghetti on the wall. And frankly, as a health creator, it's not as easy as that either, because there's a lot of work that goes behind pressing send. So it's trying to figure out those processes of thinking, you know, how am I going to create content that's actually going to resonate with people? Part of it is creating something that I know is going to work. And the latter half is kind of analyzing how that content has performed and how I can change it next time to make sure that it provides value to my audience and gets eyes on it.
Thanks, Azmain. There's a question that's come in from the audience around co-creation of content, and you know, a perception that it's just a bit of a buzzword as far as pharma content's concerned, and it doesn't really, you know, it's not systematic or widespread. And I think certainly some companies use a very, you know, small set of opinion leaders to help create some content, but, you know, it doesn't go much beyond that. So if pharma companies were to take a much more collaborative, co-creative route to content, one, would that help? Would it add more value? And, you know, what practically might that look like? So, Priya, you know, would it be useful? Would it be more interesting? Would it be, you know, something that might draw you in more or add more value if that was systematic?
I think it would, actually, if I'm honest with you. I think if it was more systematic, it would draw me in a bit more. I think I've just been listening. I mean, certainly what Azmain was saying about, you know, creating the content, it is really challenging, and I'm sure, and I know with pharma, it's really difficult as well. But I think feedback is really important. And I think if we work together at an earlier stage, and you're right, certainly I know from experience with pharma content that there is a limited number of healthcare professionals that are used. Some of the information is not always necessarily widely shared, if I'm honest with you. It's normally through word of mouth, or if we're lucky, somebody happens to put it on Twitter or social media and so on. So I think actually we do need to probably, I think it would be better to do that, if I'm honest. That's my personal opinion.
We'd like a sample of one. That'll do. Fine, thanks.
That'll do.
So maybe James, I'll come to you, because obviously you create a lot of content and you see some of those challenges around, you know, all different types of content. So what, you know, practically could companies do if they wanted to create more content with a broader range of collaborators?
I think it's not, I wouldn't say it's something new. Certainly, you know, working with advisory boards of KOLs for producing content for websites was something we did 10, 12 years ago. Like, you know, it's not that modern a concept, but there's definitely a push now to use a broader set of KOLs. We did an event recently where we only had 2 because obviously there's issues with sign off and transfer of value and all of that. But so we had a limited number, but we did make sure that we had everybody knows and, you know, very recognizable face, and the up and coming, not everybody knows or not recognizable face, to get a slightly difference of opinions there. Yes, it was only 2 KOLs, unfortunately, but that certainly had a different impact on what the content was, rather than just going for as I've done in the past, advisory board of 5 people who have been in the industry for 1,000,000 years, who know everybody and know everything, and therefore all kind of give you the same answer anyway. So why bother having 5?
I wonder if I could just add to that, or just a couple of thoughts. That
Please.
I think people can be guilty of going for their KOLs or key opinion leaders, and yet that's great. They know, you know, they often know what the topics are because they're talking on it. They've done the trials, they're the experts. They're not necessarily who you're trying to engage or who you're trying to, say, educate or share information with. And that's a trap I see pharma companies dealing with, that they're going, oh, well, we need to engage with these KOLs, or everything's focused, and they don't necessarily always, sometimes they do, but they don't always, and it maybe break it down by the different groups of stakeholders and going, different people have different needs. So maybe if they engaged with people earlier on in their medical careers or in their specialty training, they might get a better idea of what what information is needed out there, and then it might help tailor their conversation.
Can I also add to that? But it's not just doctors, but we forget the nurses, and the nursing staff, physician associates. We have so many allied health professionals involved now who also need to advance their knowledge, and they often come to me and say they don't know the latest information. So I think that's a really great point, Laura. I fully agree with you.
Thank you.
So I've had another question come in from the audience. So just stay on Q&A theme for now. And so somebody's asking what qualities a successful medical educator, would have. What are those soft skills and approach that you feel would all be successful in, your next, content star?
What do we mean by a medical educator?
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
I didn't try and interpret the question any further than that. So I think we talked a bit earlier about, succinctness and, getting your point across very clearly. And, I've seen plenty of, pharma type talking head videos, which are, an hour and a half of somebody talking to some PowerPoint slides. And that's, not amazing. But if you were advising a company to pick somebody to go and, be the face of some of their medical education to healthcare professionals, what type of profile, what type of person, what type of, communication approach would you be looking for?
I just recommend Azmain. He's got it. Let's get him involved.
I think if I may hop on there, it just creating content on social media, I've had to kind of teach myself to be interesting in terms of my delivery, in terms of how I put the information across, in terms of how I organize the information that I say. And part of that, when I create videos on social media, it's obviously very strictly scripted. And obviously me speaking now is not scripted at all. But there are kind of skills that you, I think, pick up along the way in your journey as a social media creator that are directly applicable to all aspects of life, in terms of, you know, if someone's actually listening to you, make it interesting. Or you know, if you are going to use a PowerPoint presentation, you know, make it look interesting with a few subtle animations, some images, not having a wall of text, just those really simple things, which, you know, it's kind of any skill that you would expect a good public speaker to have, I think translates to the skills an educator should have. An educator should be open, they should be responsive to their audience. They obviously should know what they're talking about, but also not be afraid to admit when they're wrong, or admit when they don't know something even. So I think it's a lot more simple than we give it credit for. I'm not going to go into all of the theories of medical education that I've learned about through my degree, but you know, what I have learned, though, is that there is so much that goes into being an educator that we don't appreciate on the other side of being the one who's being educated. And that there's a lot of the theory that goes behind how are you going to tailor information to a particular audience. And one particular level, one kind of basic thing within medical education is identifying who the content is aimed at. And Dreyfus and Dreyfus, the Dreyfus brothers came up with this concept of the levels of novice to expert. So categorizing your content as to which particular target audience am I aiming for? What's their expertise? How much time do I have to spend in this particular teaching session? What's actually viable to communicate within this time frame? Thinking about all of those aspects, you know, it's not just relevant for, say, medical or nursing students. I think it's relevant for, you know, consultants like Dr. Priya, because you have to consider the level that your audience is at and the time constraints they have. All of those are important parts of being an educator. And those are important aspects of the communication, because keeping those keeping that checklist in mind means that you're going to tailor your information and communication style to the audience that you've set out. And I think that's really, really important if you are an educator.
Okay, so there's one last area I want to just touch on before we sort of wrap up. So, you know, we know that there's this endless demand for knowledge and information from doctors. The content and the format and where it's available all can make a difference. We don't really think that there's much perceived difference between what a company might call promotional and non-promotional content. But companies also take this approach where, you know, they'll invest in paying other people to create content at arm's reach. And that could be, you know, general disease area knowledge, or, you know, broader therapy area knowledge, or whatever it might be. Allowing for companies to, you know, improve some of the quality of their content and their production levels and volumes, would there be an advantage for companies taking ownership of that type of, you know, broader content back from, you know, other providers that they currently fund through grants and so on and so forth? And taken more ownership of that arm's reach type content. So maybe Lara, get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, Mike. And I think it comes down to what's the company's objective and what are they trying to do. So from a medical affairs perspective, that's shifted from, say, medical affairs are the scientific experts. That doesn't mean the other people in the brand team aren't scientific experts, but your focus is on the therapy area and the disease area. Traditionally, medical affairs is a support function. That's really shifted, especially in the last 10 to 15 years, that medical is becoming more proactive. They're becoming a key pillar in the brand team. So you'll see a lot more engagement from a medical affairs perspective, a lot more non-promotional content coming out. And again, because that's what people maybe are looking for, that means that there's more scope for creating that disease awareness content in-house or the therapy area piece. But they may use agencies to deliver that content ultimately. But I think if I'm correct in understanding what you're trying to say, Mike, is that planning or understanding what they need to create, the responsibility should be in-house in pharma. And it's about, that often sits, I would think, more with the medical affairs as part of a cross-functional team discussion, that they're co-creating with their commercial colleagues. What do we need to do to create the impact, to improve standards of care within a disease area, right? So what materials can we create or conversations can we have? And then how do we say to the agency, because the agencies maybe have a little bit more scope or idea, and James, you probably on innovative ways of delivering that, which sometimes in-house, you don't always have that because you haven't been exposed to it. And that's where agencies can really help.
Well, I have to agree, obviously. Yes, absolutely. Production of that content, and yeah, the finding the channels and the ways to get that out there is very much something we do. We usually, clients will say, "Hey, we've got some stuff." You know, it's very rarely starting from scratch. It'll be, "We've got some stuff. What can we do with it?" And we have to think about, well, have you got access to this? Can we put it on there? Have you got a Twitter account? Have you got an email list? Have you got a website? Have you ever produced any video content, and work out what we can do with what's there and make it better, and develop a strategy for what the content is, where it goes, and how it meets the audience's needs ultimately.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it's just people maybe knowing what they can and can't do and taking more responsibility of what they can create in-house. That's something I tend to challenge medical affairs to do, go and think outside the box and really drive that education yourselves.
Okay, just Priya, last thoughts from you around what you would advise pharma companies to do to keep supporting healthcare professionals?
I think you need to sort of engage with us more, be more open, be more succinct, maybe start liaising with our trainees, with our juniors, like don't just target the top experts, but I think we do need to work together at an earlier phase and start together. And I think they do need to take responsibility for the content in terms from an education perspective. So that would be my dream, is that we work together. So, yeah.
Cool. Azmain, last words of advice?
Yeah, I think collaboration is key. As Dr. Priya said, as I'm more junior, I would love more kind of focused content towards more junior doctors, towards more of the multidisciplinary team. And just to mention that one of my new ventures is launching health media consultancy. So to help healthcare professionals and healthcare organizations using the skills that I've developed as a content creator and the skills of my colleagues as well, to reach out to their target audiences, to create high quality health content in kind of the ways that we have managed to develop our skills, and to kind of transfer those skills and knowledge, and to come up with strategy for organizations on how to achieve those goals. So I'd be really, really happy if anyone would reach out to me, healthmediaconsultancy@gmail.com. And I'm happy to work with you guys to see how we can tailor content that, again, meets the common ground. I think that's kind of the message of today.
Cool. Thanks, Azmain. and we're all for more collaboration. So good luck with that. And Lara, final thought from you?
Yeah, I would echo what Azmain and Priya have said, is that that collaboration piece is key. You know, identify before you create anything, see what people need, and then see how that fits with what you're doing, but keep it short and succinct. It's easy to do and still keep it compliant, but it needs to have that hook to pull it in.
Cool.
So I think that is really important.
And James, first things that you would advise companies to go and do tomorrow after listening to this amazing panel discussion?
Well, I think I'd summarize what we've discussed as content being relevant, content being connected, and what we haven't discussed, but we always talk about, is it also being measurable? How you know what works and what doesn't work. So, and add that in as a conversation for next time.
We'll have that next time. Super. So thank you all. Thank you, Priya. Thank you, James. Thank you, Lara. Thank you, Azmain. That's been really interesting, really insightful. I hope everybody who's been watching and listening has found that interesting and valuable. And, you know, we are all contactable through LinkedIn and various things. And this is a discussion that will continue to run for the foreseeable future, because the need isn't going to go away, and the opportunity for pharmaceutical companies to meet that need is better than ever, but it needs a slightly different approach and slightly more refined content, and you know, but also an imperative to act and do it now rather than looking for the perfect strategy. So thank you, everyone, and here's looking forward to next time.